Lines. Washington's point man on North Korea heads to New York for talks with the permanent members of the UN Security Council. He urges them to implement North Korea sanctions to a T. The US believes the regime's denuclearization requires intense financial pressure. Third and final leg. President Moon Jae-in is in Cambodia for talks on boosting business ties with the Southeast Asian country. The South Korean leader has been on the road for close to a week, making previous stops in Brunei and Malaysia. Plus, another day, another Brexit vote in Britain's Parliament. This time, lawmakers vote to seek an extension to the divorce date from the EU, initially set for March 29th. The ball is now in the hands of the EU's 27 other nations. Our top story this morning, the US Special Envoy to North Korea has met with the UN Security Council to discuss the process of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula following the collapse talks between Pyongyang and Washington in Hanoi just last month. Cha Sang-mi starts us off.
U.S. Special Representative for North Korea Stephen Biegun traveled to New York on Thursday to brief the UN Security Council on the outcome of the recent North Korea-U.S. summit in Vietnam's capital last month. During an hour-long meeting with 15 members of the UN Security Council, including the 5 permanent ones, China, France, Russia, the UK, and the US, Biegun reportedly called for the support of the Council to maintain dialogue with Pyongyang while trying to deter the regime from any provocations, citing the recent reconstruction movements at the North's previous missile test site. Biegun was said to have reaffirmed that the sanctions remain imposed on the regime until it comes out to denuclearize. Blaming North Korea's request for sanctions relief in their entirety, Biegun said Pyongyang and Washington couldn't sign an agreement in Hanoi, but that the talks were constructive and the door is open for dialogue for North Korea. The special envoy is also said to have mentioned the recent annual report on North Korea from a UN panel of experts released Monday, which said the North was successfully getting around UN sanctions through illegal ship-to-ship transfers. Meanwhile, Cho Tae-yeol, South Korea's ambassador to the UN, also participated in the meeting following the invitation from the UNSC due to the involvement in the denuclearization talks despite non-membership. Cho hosted lunch talks with Biegun the same day to discuss the latest developments. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
South Korea and the United States have agreed to maintain close cooperation to improve inter-Korean relations in a way that helps restart the nuclear dialogue between North Korea and the United States. According to Seoul's foreign ministry on this Friday, the two sides had a working group session in Washington on Thursday, their first face-to-face since the Hanoi summit ended prematurely. Multiple sources say they agreed on a sanctions waiver required for video reunions for war-separated families here in Korea. The State Department also said Seoul and Washington discussed efforts to achieve the North's final, fully verified denuclearization through the implementation of UN Security Council resolutions. Acting U.S. Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan says while President Trump and his diplomats continue to negotiate with North Korea, the regime's nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles continue to threaten the United States and its allies. In a written statement before the Senate Armed Services Committee on Thursday, Shanahan said the Pentagon supports the ongoing negotiations with Pyongyang, but needs to make sure Washington holds a strong position during the talks. Shanahan also said he and South Korean Defense Minister Jung Yong-do will meet for the first time later this month. Among other things, the two defense chiefs will discuss their recent joint military exercises, which were sharply scaled down to support diplomacy with Pyongyang. And that same U.S. defense official has dismissed reports that the Trump administration wants its allies, including South Korea, to pay cost plus 50% for the stationing of American troops in their country. Lee Seung-jae with the details.
According to reports by Bloomberg and other news outlets, Washington wants its allies to pay cost plus 50 for the stationing of American troops, meaning U.S. allies in Asia and Europe will pay the full cost of hosting U.S. troops and 50% more for the privilege. However, testifying before the Senate Armed Services Committee on Thursday, acting U.S. Defense Secretary Patrick Shanahan denied the reports, calling them erroneous. Despite shooting down reports of a so-called premium service, Shanahan said the U.S. is not going to run a business and it's not going to run a charity. He added the important part is that the allies pay their fair share, with payments coming in via lots of different forms. According to the Washington Post, although the acting defense secretary said the Pentagon would not take such an approach, the formula has been circulating within the Trump administration. It cited sources familiar with the matter as saying the cost plus 50 formulation was mentioned to at least one country in a formal negotiation setting. Observers say such an approach could potentially risk the long-standing alliance between the U.S. and its friends around the world. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
South Korea and Japan have agreed to continue negotiations to avoid a further strain in ties over a Seoul court's ruling on Japan's use of forced labor during World War II. The Director General for Northeast Asian Affairs, Kim Yong-gil, and his Japanese counterpart Kenji Kanasugi met on Thursday to discuss ways to resolve the bilateral dispute. The session came amid reports that Tokyo is reviewing economic retaliation, such as raising tariffs on South Korean imports and restricting the issuance of visas. According to an official at the Foreign Ministry, the two sides agreed to avoid such actions. Kanasugi is scheduled to meet Seoul's top nuclear envoy Lee Do-hoon on Friday to discuss North Korea's denuclearization. President Moon Jae-in is in Cambodia on the last leg of his three-nation tour of the ASEAN region. He's expected to tout his administration's so-called New Southern Policy, which is aimed at building bridges between South Korea and Southeast Asia. The South Korean leader is also going to meet with his Cambodian counterpart in the coming hours. They're going to be talking about boosting business ties. Our Shin Se-min, who is travelling with the president, files this report from Phnom Penh.
The tail end of the week-long three-nation tour has brought President Moon Jae-in to Cambodia, making him the first South Korean leader to make a state visit to the country in a decade. President Moon is looking to upgrade South Korea's ties with Cambodia on multiple fronts and drive up two-way trade that logged $870 million as of the end of 2017. President Moon and Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen, during their summit Friday, will sign deals on joint research cooperation for academic institutions as well as financial investment. The leaders are also expected to shore up their ties in the agriculture, infrastructure, and construction sectors. The South Korean leader had previously revealed his ambition to make the New Southern Policy part of his administration's legacy, promising to visit all ASEAN member nations at least once during his 5-year term, part of the reason why he chose to travel to 3 ASEAN nations in one swing this week. Still, there are hurdles to overcome. Despite its small trade volume with South Korea and relatively expensive labor costs, the kingdom is considered an important target market for Seoul, given its rapidly growing capital market, the growth potential of the Mekong River, and South Korea's relative lack of diplomatic diversity. In addition, Cambodia's role has increased after it was the country coordinator for Korea-ASEAN dialogue relations until last year. In other words, its ability to bridge ASEAN and South Korea is unmatched. As one of Southeast Asia's 4 economic outperformers, Cambodia, to President Moon, is one of the most attractive markets for his pivot to the region. One way to get those deals started will be the first ever Korea-Mekong summit scheduled for later this year. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Phnom Penh.
South Korea is holding a celebration to mark the 59th anniversary of a 1960 pro-democracy demonstration. On March 15th in 1960, protesters took to the streets against the authoritarian regime of then-President Lee Seung-man after a rigged re-election of the president. Vote counts were manipulated to extend Lee's term. Lee had ruled the country since he became the country's first leader in 1948. A nationwide protest later took place in April, forcing him to step down. Some 1,500 people are expected to attend today's event, including Prime Minister Lee Nak-yon and leaders of various political parties. Another day, another vote. British lawmakers have, this time, voted to seek an extension to the Brexit date initially set for March 29th. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Adam. Adam, no one really knows what's going on, but perhaps you can shed some light about what might happen next.
Well, Mark, the simple answer is, as is the case for many of these things related to Brexit, we still don't know. MPs approved Prime Minister Theresa May's motion to ask the EU for a delay by 412 votes to 202. Thursday's vote came a day after lawmakers rejected a no-deal Brexit under any circumstances. Now, May says Brexit could be delayed by 3 months, so until the end of June, if MPs back her deal next week on Wednesday, to be precise. If not, then she warned of a longer extension, which may prompt Brexiteers within her own Conservative Party to back her deal. However, all of this is only possible if every other EU member state approves the extension to Article 50. EU leaders will meet in a summit next Thursday. The threat of a no-deal Brexit is also still a possibility, and the government says it is preparing contingency plans for such a scenario. MPs earlier rejected an attempt to secure another Brexit referendum by a significant margin. Even campaigners for a second referendum said now was not the time to vote on it. They also rejected a cross-party plan to allow Parliament to take control of the Brexit process. That motion was only rejected by a margin of 2 votes. The US Senate has rebuked President Trump's declaration of a national emergency at the southern border. 12 Republicans joined Democrats in Thursday's vote to overturn Trump's declaration, which was aimed at providing billions of dollars in state funds for his border wall with Mexico. In a tweet shortly after, the president vowed to veto the decision. Congress needs a 2/3 majority of both chambers to override a presidential veto, which is unlikely. The issue could ultimately be decided by the courts. Thursday's vote came just a day after the Senate dealt another blow to his foreign policy by voting to end US support for the Saudi Arabian-led coalition's war in Yemen. A Swedish teenager has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize after kick-starting a global campaign against climate change. 16-year-old Greta Thunberg was nominated by 3 Norwegian MPs. She began a solo protest in Sweden last August, but has since inspired students around the globe to join her cause. Her nomination also comes a day ahead of a global strike where thousands of young people on Friday will rally in several cities across 105 countries. Thunberg said she was honoured and very grateful for the nomination. If she wins, she will become the youngest person to receive the prestigious prize. The winner of the Nobel Peace Prize will be announced in October.
K-pop star Seungri, who has been accused of arranging sex services for potential business partners, was released this morning after 16 hours of questioning by police. Speaking to reporters as he left Seoul Police Headquarters, the former Big Bang member said he will request to delay his mandatory military service and promises to sincerely cooperate with the police. Singer and TV star Jung Joon-young, who was questioned on the same day as Seungri, also spent the night at the police station, returning home after 21 hours of questioning over his alleged illegal filming of his sexual encounters. Jung said he had turned in what he has called his, quote, golden phone, which Jung reportedly used only for messaging. The head of South Korea's National Police Agency has vowed to thoroughly investigate the sex video scandal involving those male celebrities and is pledging to conduct a wide-reaching internal investigation of his own agency after some speculation over potential police involvement was raised. Seung reports.
At a parliamentary meeting convened Thursday by the Public Administration and Security Committee, South Korea's police commissioner stressed that his agency is committed to a comprehensive investigation of the sex scandal.
We will thoroughly investigate both the new claims and the alleged crimes currently being discussed.
The chief also addressed the growing suspicions about ties between the police and the perpetrators.
I will also carry out a tough internal inspection of the agency, punish those involved regardless of rank, and report the findings to the public.
A day earlier, the commissioner gave an unscheduled press conference to address the scandal. He said the police could not immediately arrest the singer Jung Joon-young, accused of making the sex videos, because so far there are only suspicions and not enough evidence that he committed a crime. Jung had just returned from shooting a TV show overseas. While the top police chief reassured the public that the investigation will be thorough, some are still skeptical and demand that prosecutors themselves take over the case. Seung, Arirang News.
Now, following other countries' suit, South Korea has decided to ban Boeing 737 MAX aircraft from landing and taking off at local airports and from passing through the country's airspace. This decision comes after there were 2 crashes involving the 737 MAX model in a 5-month period. On Thursday, the Transport Ministry notified airlines worldwide of the decision and said the measure will last 3 months. The government also plans to ban any additional acquisitions of the model until it's shown to be safe. South Korea's export and import prices for February went up on month on rising global oil prices. The Bank of Korea says export prices rose 0.2% on month on higher prices of petroleum-related products that offset falling prices of electronic goods exports. Import prices jumped near 2% on month in February on higher prices of raw material imports and oil prices. Dubai crude, which is Korea's benchmark, jumped more than 9% on month, recording an average of $65 a barrel. Now, South Korea's investment in science and technology is among the highest in the world. And according to our Oh Soo-young, the government plans to further increase funding in core sectors, given the proliferation of artificial intelligence and smart technology.
South Korea plans to increase public spending on artificial intelligence and renewable energy as core sectors of research and development. On Thursday, the Ministry of Science and ICT announced its 2020 investment guidelines, which aim to make public spending on science more efficient and increase positive social impact. In the era of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the ministry added AI and renewable energies to its key areas of R&D, along with driverless cars, fine dust reduction technology and smart infrastructure. Such technology is deemed crucial, especially with South Korea soon to become the first country in the world to commercialize 5G for regular consumers. Given the ongoing fine dust problem on the peninsula, the ministry plans to work with the private sector to expand investment in technology to lower the environmental impact from chemicals, as well as reduce air pollution. Other areas of investment include technology related to agriculture, aerospace, disaster response and defence. South Korea is one of the world's biggest spenders in R&D, coming 5th in terms of total annual spending and ranking 1st in terms of the amount relative to GDP. Investment has grown from some $2.8 billion in 1990 to $61 billion in 2016. The number of researchers topped 460,000 in 2016, nearly 3 times the number of about 20 years ago. While investing in new technology, the ministry also plans to ramp up investment in basic science research to $2.2 billion, up from the $1.5 billion allotted this year. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
The 2 Koreas agreed to engage in more economic cooperation when their leaders met at last year's summit. Down the road, that could mean tourism. And local experts met on Thursday to to discuss about specific plans for the peaceful use of the demilitarized zone, the DMZ, that separates the two Koreas at the moment, as a tourist destination. Lee Min-sun reports.
Experts and officials from the culture and tourism sectors gathered in Seoul on Thursday to discuss ways to build peaceful tourism in the demilitarized zone. The forum was held by the Culture Ministry and the Korea Tourism Organization as South and North take practical steps toward peace in the DMZ by removing landmines and guard posts. The hope is that the DMZ will come to stand for togetherness and peace instead of pain and division. Some of the programs suggested at the forum include joint tours of famous mountains in both Koreas like Seoraksan in the south and Kumgangsan in the north. Also, a train that would take passengers sightseeing along the east coast and an ecology peace garden that would give visitors a peek at the region's untouched natural environment. Some experts also emphasized the importance of tourism in building a virtuous cycle of sustainable peace and economic growth.
Tourism is one of the two Korea's major forms of economic exchange and cooperation that can sustain peace. Cooperation in tourism is usually accompanied by projects in logistics and infrastructure, and that will likely be a new engine for the economy.
Still, before peace tourism can move forward in earnest, there need to be major steps taken in terms of denuclearization and lifting of sanctions. But the experts think now is still the best time to discuss the possibility as South and North look to build their ties and cooperate in a range of fields. Lee Min-sun, Arirang News.
Good morning. Bring an umbrella on your way out. We have a mix of rain and snow in the forecast for many areas today. It's been already raining in parts of Chungcheongdo and Jeollado provinces, which will gradually expand to rest of the country. In Seoul, we'll see light rain and possibly snow from around mid-afternoon. Meanwhile, ultrafine dust levels are high in central western regions, including here in the capital. And Incheon and Gyeonggi-do province and Chungcheong-namdo province will likely to see polluted air all day today. Temperatures, though, will rise to above seasonal averages, but be aware of big temperature gaps between lows and highs and dress accordingly. While Saturday will be chillier, but sunny skies will return for the weekend. Daily highs will be similar to slightly lower for southern areas, while Seoul will be a tad higher, getting up to 12 degrees this afternoon. And we are expecting to have typical spring weather conditions next week. That's Korea for you, and here's the international weather for viewers around the world.
Well, that's all the news we have for now on this Friday morning here in Seoul. Stay tuned to us here on Arirang TV. Plenty more coming up, including our next newscast at noon Korea time with our very own Lee Ji-yoon. But if we don't see you, have a wonderful and restful weekend. Until next time, goodbye.
you know Seoul? On the banks of the mighty Hangang River rises Asia's most dynamic city, a hub of technology, culture, and finance.